Support for the Legislative Gazette comes from New York State United Teachers, working to support students, educators, and public schools as the center of their communities through the Public Schools Unite Us initiative, and United University Professions, representing 37,000 academic and professional employees at SUNY campuses and teaching hospitals across New York State. Frederick E. Cole, President, uupinfo.org. Interests on both sides of the U.S.-Canadian border remain wary despite a month-long pause in threatened tariffs. The Legislative Gazette's Pat Bradley reports.
President Trump announced that 25% tariffs on imported goods from Mexico and Canada that were set to go into effect on Monday would be postponed until March. North Country Chamber of Commerce President Gary Douglas told attendees at an event Tuesday that despite the brief reprieve, lasting damage to cross-border trade has been done.
In 2017, there was a negative reaction to some of the limited tariffs that were applied from the White House at that time, and we started to see a little bit of backlash. We got through it, and we came back without a lot of damage being done. This time, I think we are already deep into damage. We're going to have to work very hard to try to start to undo the damage and hopefully make it limited. No matter where we go in the tariff matter now, there's been some real damage.
Douglas says the 30-day delay is welcome, but the thought of potential tariffs that linger continues to have a negative impact on cross-border trade and business.
That 30 days hangs over us, and that in and of itself, while better than going forward with the tariffs, is still having a deleterious effect on business decisions because it keeps a cloud of uncertainty over the economy. So the sooner we get to where we get out of this situation, the better.
Town of Plattsburgh Supervisor Michael Cashman is cautiously optimistic about the 30-day pause, but says nearby communities must remain vigilant.
We're talking about the impact to groceries. We're talking about the impact to our farmers with getting key materials. We're talking about our manufacturing businesses being able to get supplies, provide supplies, keeping workers on the line because there could be work stoppages if they can't get materials. I mean, it is very, very impactful. And I know many of the individuals in the manufacturing realm are trying to source other opportunities to make sure that they can keep business moving as normal as possible. 30 days is not a long time. So there is still a lot of anxiety built into this period of time. There's a huge sigh of relief, but we can't sit on our laurels either.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, met privately with Canadian Consul General Tom Clark on Tuesday to discuss the potential ramifications of federal tariffs. In brief remarks released by the governor's office, Clark says the relationship between Canada and New York goes beyond trade.
As far as Canada is concerned, the relationship with New York State is one of our most important relationships anywhere in the world. You're the 10th largest economy in the world. And when we take a look at $50 billion in two-way trade every year, that number says it all. But I think, as you've said more than once, it's not the numbers that describe the relationship. It's the centuries that we have worked together, lived together, and cooperated together.
Quebec's Delegate General in New York, David Brulotte, says the economic implications of tariffs for trade between Quebec and New York State are unknown.
I can only speak for the province of Quebec, but Canada said openly as well that there's a list of tariffs that could be imposed from Canada. And as our premier from Quebec mentioned on several occasions, nothing is off the table. But we'll make sure that we're ready to protect Quebec's economy, the citizens of Quebec. And lastly, to your point about New York, I think our relationship with the state is strong. Our companies, both south and north of the border, have vested interest across the frontier, across the border. So I think through our communities, our companies, we'll find ways to go through those eventual tariffs.
On Tuesday, Vermont Governor Phil Scott formed a multi-agency support team on potential tariffs to assess possible impacts on the state, identify options to mitigate short and long-term effects, and opportunities for any potential upside to tariffs.
For the Legislative Gazette, I'm Pat Bradley.
You are listening to the Legislative Gazette, a program about New York State government and politics. I'm David Gistina. This week I sat down to talk with Stephen Greenberg about the latest Siena poll, which finds Governor Kathy Hochul's favorability rating still underwater.
Let's take a half step back and put this in context. Everyone talks about New York, a solidly blue, dark blue state. Well, one of the reasons we say that is because there are more than twice as many Democrats in New York as there are Republicans. 49% of the enrolled voters of the state are Democrats. Only 23% of the enrolled voters of the state are Republicans. So Democrats have a better than 2-to-1 edge. With that in context, over her 3.5-year tenure as governor, Kathy Hochul has never once had a favorability rating that hit higher than 48%. 48% favorable is the best she's ever gotten. She's never gotten a majority of New Yorkers, despite the fact that 49% of New Yorkers are Democrats, to have a favorable view of her. For the last several months, her poll numbers are in this sort of narrowish band. I mean, they're not horrible, but they're not good. Right now, only 39% of New Yorkers have a favorable view of Hochul. 47%, a plurality, not a majority, have an unfavorable view of her. Back in December, it was 39 favorable, 49 unfavorable. So she picked up 2 points on the bad side that came down, but still in this middling range. And it's true of her job approval rating as well. Right now, 44% of voters approve of the job that Kathy Hochul's doing as governor, but a plurality, 48%, disapprove. Back in December, it was 46 to 49. So down a point for the governor, essentially, this month. But again, very middle-of-the-road poll ratings from her constituents.
Yeah, Stephen, and I think, too, when you look at these numbers, while 31% of voters say they would reelect Hochul, 57% want, quote, someone else, and that has to have members of her own party who may be thinking about a primary, possibly. And, of course, we've been hearing rumblings from the Republicans. They're looking for a candidate, and we hear a lot now about Republican Mike Lawler because, these poll numbers are speaking to the opposition.
No question. I mean, the good news for Governor Hochul, when you look at a poll like this, is that the election is not for at least a year and a half. The Democratic primary would be June of next year, the general election November of next year. So she has time. More concerning, though, Dave, than the 31 reelect, 57 prefer someone else. Look at that number just with Democrats alone. Yeah. Only 47% of Democrats say they're prepared to reelect Hochul. 41% of Democrats say they want someone else. So it's not just Republicans and independents, it's also Democrats.
No question. And yet, when you look at her policy proposals, they get pretty much high marks. So it doesn't seem like the policy proposals that people like, they're accrediting it to Governor Hochul ultimately.
That, I think, is exactly right. Look, Siena asked voters about 10 specific proposals that Governor Hochul had either in her State of the State address or in her budget presentation. All 10 of them get support from the overall electorate of New York. 8 of the 10 have majority support. 2 of them only have plurality support. But 8 of them have majority support, and 4 of them have majority support of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. So there are 4 issues that the governor talked about earlier, last month, that across the political spectrum, voters agree with her on these issues.
That's Siena pollster Stephen Greenberg. listening to the Legislative Gazette, a program about New York State government and politics. I'm David Gistina. Former New York Congressman Lee Zeldin has been confirmed as the new administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, and environmental groups in New York are bracing for impact. The Legislative Gazette's Jesse King explains.
Zeldin is a Long Island Republican who unsuccessfully ran for governor in 2022. In his new role, Zeldin has received directives from President Trump to reverse some Biden-era regulations, cut back spending, and promote energy production and artificial intelligence.
One of the reasons why President Trump was elected was to help restore our economy. We must connect the greatness of American innovation with the greatness of American conservation.
The appointment has environmental groups nervous. Riverkeeper President Tracy Brown says she's worked with Zeldin before, back when she was an advocate with Long Island's Save the Sound. She thinks Zeldin has an understanding of how climate change and pollution threaten his home district, but she's not sure what to expect from him going forward.
The real question is he going to kind of be true to his lived experience and what he knows about the importance of clean water and clean air and getting climate adaptation projects built in haste? Or will he just be following the directives of President Trump?
The EPA did not respond to a request for interview, but the Republican has told outlets like The Hill that anyone not, quote, committed to the EPA's mission might not belong with the agency. In his first days in office, Trump placed a freeze on any new regulations pending review, including an EPA rule that would have put stricter limits on PFAS in industrial wastewater. The administration also tried to place a temporary freeze on all federal grants and loans before courts intervened last week, and it has been overseeing the firing of federal employees in a variety of departments. Judith Enck, a former Region 2 administrator for the EPA in the Obama administration, says she's not impressed with Zeldin's environmental record so far. According to the League of Conservation Voters, Zeldin often voted against environmental legislation in Congress.
We've got a little bit of a preview of where Zeldin is going to bring the agency. And we have a real advantage in New York because when he ran for governor, he raised only two environmental issues. First, he wanted to lift the New York ban on dangerous hydrofracking for gas. And second, he was very outspoken in opposing congestion pricing.
Environmental advocates are already butting heads with the EPA over its latest 5-year review of a General Electric dredging project in the Upper Hudson. GE polluted the river with more than 1 million pounds of PCBs until the late 1970s, turning a 200-mile stretch into a Superfund site. The dredging was supposed to bring PCB levels down, but groups with Friends of a Clean Hudson want the EPA to declare it unsuccessful or, quote, not protective of the environment, as they claim PCB levels haven't dropped far enough. The EPA's latest report said it doesn't have enough data to make that call. Brown says she's not necessarily worried that ongoing cleanup efforts will fall apart, but if Zeldin makes significant cuts at the EPA, she's worried future Superfund sites could go unnoticed and unaddressed.
It's what we don't know and what we won't be taking action on that is really disturbing, and that eventually, we're going to have to pay that price down the line.
Others are more optimistic. Peter Lopez, Executive Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Science at Scenic Hudson, is a former Republican state assemblyman and former Region 2 administrator for the EPA in the first Trump administration. He says he's familiar with Zeldin, and he's waiting to see how his approach plays out on the ground before sounding the alarm.
As the administration settles in, knowing my sense of Lee and his leadership, discernment will be important, and understanding what are the decisions at the margin. So they're big programs, big policies, stated goals, but what does that mean when we get into the nitty-gritty of governing and decision-making on a case-by-case basis?
Lopez says he hopes groups like Scenic Hudson can work with a new administration to get the EPA to declare GE's dredging not protective. He'd also like to see Zeldin focus on lead contamination, air pollution, and ways to improve recycling across the country.
I think everyone is understandably paying close attention because there's a lot coming out in rapid fire, and it remains to be seen what the actual translation looks like.
Looking ahead, Enck expects she'll be shifting her focus to work with state lawmakers over the next 4 years. David Toman, Executive Director of Clearwater, urges lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to consider that environmental regulations aren't a partisan issue, that cracking down on polluters benefits everyone.
It really is about the people clean water, clean air is not about restricting industry. It's about making sure industry follows their production pattern all the way through to make sure that the environment is protected.
For the Legislative Gazette, I'm Jesse King.
A program to help New Yorkers file their taxes for free is back. The Legislative Gazette's Alexander Babby reports.
The Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program brings volunteer tax preparers and taxpayers making less than $67,000 annually together. It's sponsored in the Capital Region by the Regional United Way and Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Albany. Speaking at Catholic Central School Tuesday, Congressman Paul Tonko, a Democrat whose 20th district includes the school, says student volunteers helped save millions in taxpayer dollars in 2024. But he adds it could have been more.
We have to make certain people know about it and advance the interest to individuals so that they can participate. And it's a meaningful way for them to be empowered as a household. When we hear about that $6 million in refunds, that translates into opportunity that struggling families just simply might not have.
New York State Assemblyman John McDonald, a Democrat from the 108th District, says keeping dollars in people's pockets is a kitchen table issue.
It is a struggle to keep the lights on, to pay the rent, to put good, nutritious food on the table. And that is why this program exists, to help those individuals meet those day-to-day commitments that unfortunately many individuals take for granted.
Students trained as tax preparers are members of George Hanna's business class. Hanna says he's grateful to be able to provide real-world experience.
It's something they can take with them after they graduate Catholic Central. Also, they are helping people in the community, which I find to be just awesome. I love to see the clients' reactions when a student gets them a $1,000 or $2,000 refund, which many in here know that those people really need.
Isabella Lape, a Catholic Central senior, says she's looking forward to her second year in the program and helping people take the stress out of tax time.
Last year, I was able to get both my basic and advanced certifications in tax training. Getting my advanced certification has been an amazing opportunity in expanding my knowledge of taxes and helping a more diverse group of clientele with more difficult tax returns. I am excited to get back this year and continue the impact VITA is to our community.
Ron Diet, Buffalo Territory Manager with the IRS, touted the VITA program.
They can, in fact, prepare and file your taxes electronically for free, get you an electronic direct deposit refund, which is safe and secure. You can check the status of those refunds using the irs.gov website.
Diet also promoted the Earned Income Tax Credit, meant for people with low to moderate incomes, especially those with children, ahead of Earned Income Tax Credit Awareness Day on the 31st.
Last year, nationwide, 23 million workers and families received about $64 billion in Earned Income Tax Credit across the whole country. That's about $2,700 on average for across the country. Here in New York, 1.43 million workers and families claimed the Earned Income Tax Credit. That's $3.75 billion for the New York area.
But Diet says about a fifth of all eligible taxpayers don't file the EITC. Sharon Moore is a taxpayer advocate with the IRS. She encourages people having tax troubles to reach out.
You just have to have tried to resolve the issue with the IRS and have been unable to, or you may have a hardship and need to speak to someone right away. That's the criteria. You can reach out to our office by phone, fax, email. We're listed in the directories. We're under irs.gov/advocate. And every taxpayer is eligible to receive our service free.
The state and federal tax deadline is April 15th. For the Legislative Gazette, I'm Alexander Babby.
You are listening to the Legislative Gazette, a program about New York State government and politics. I'm David Gustina. New York State parks, historic sites, campgrounds, and trails saw a record number of visitors last year. According to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, the sites hosted more than 88 million visitors in 2024. The tally marks a 5% increase over 2023 and 12 consecutive years of growth in visitation at state sites. New York State parks say solar eclipse viewing events last year broke attendance records. The Legislative Gazette's Samantha Simmons spoke with Acting State Parks Commissioner Randy Simons about the achievement and other investments.
It's the trajectory that state parks has been on for a while now, right? Historic investment. And what we're doing is we're taking sort of that blueprint of what we've done at New York State Parks, and we're putting out more wider, more expansive into the communities. We want communities to invest in swim infrastructure, host learn to swim programs like we have done at parks, playgrounds, and we call it New York Bricks, building recreational infrastructure for communities, kids, and families. And it's really community engagement in community centers. And it's all with the purpose of getting offline, getting outside, unplugging and playing. And it's really addressing that digital mental health crisis that we have that's running rampant, particularly amongst our youth.
And you touched on it, and now I'm going to ask about it. So in her State of the State address, Hochul announced the Unplug and Play initiative, which would invest in youth sports and parks and community activities, and another $50 million in last year's New York Swims program. So how is the park system taking part of this? Because it's not just within actual state parks, it's a little bit, outside of that.
Correct. So we're running grant programs. So Swims last year, $150 million. At one point, we were going to put out in 2 parts. And it was so widely successful, we had to put all $150 million out. We got it out, started getting out the door in under 3 months. We saw the success of that. So we need to bring that back. This year, we're adding not-for-profits to that. But also under Swims, it was Learn to Swim programs. Each year, we teach 400 kids how to swim in our parks. When we tripled the amount of facilities that we held this program in last year, we jumped that number to 2,000. So we really want to help communities replicate the successful blueprint that we've done. And when you look at parks, you look at community centers, you look at playgrounds. Typically, in stressed budgets, these maybe aren't first to go, but they will go pretty quickly. And so what we're doing is saying we will aid you, communities. We will give you the investment that will allow you to repair and refurbish this infrastructure that you have, or build new infrastructure. Each of the grant programs come in at a certain ceiling that will allow you to do that. And because of the success that we've seen, we're just trying to reach out more expansively into the communities that necessarily we don't have a historic site or state park, particularly within that community.
And I want to go now into the parks. So the parks had record attendance last year. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened, why that happened?
12 consecutive years, 88 million. Which is an all-time high for us. That was a 4.5% increase, and that 4.5% increase is an all-time high for us as well. And I think it's a number of different things. And last year was a special year, certainly, right? We had our centennial, our 100-year anniversary. We had the eclipse that brought out 1 million people. In April last year when we celebrated that. You saw through the New York Swims program, the governor waived fees at state park pools. We saw a 36% increase at all our pools last year when we waived the fees, $1, $2, $3. It mattered. And then when temperatures, rose above that 93, 94, 95 for the 4 consecutive days in mid-June, we waived fees at all our parks. But I also think coming out, it's post-pandemic. And I think during the pandemic, many felt, where do I feel safe? They certainly felt safe in their home, and they felt safe outside, right? The parks are an extension of their backyard. And I think it was a much deeper appreciation, not only for the benefits it serves to make memories and have fun and take your family out there, but health. It is really physical and mental wellness when you can get outside, you can unplug and play, and just get off those devices, because they can be harmful in many ways if we don't monitor and manage that, and state parks and be a prescription for that.
When I was going through the data page for the attendance at park, some parks had 0 attendance. Is that like a miscalculation, or what happened there? I guess really didn't happen there.
So we are finalizing numbers. That's just probably paperwork. So what we do is each month, parks report in. If we see numbers that are dramatically higher than last year or dramatically lower, we investigate that and just to make sure that the numbers were properly entered. So if you see a 0 for now, it's just a matter of we're going back. So right now we're 88 million. We could be more by the time the numbers are finalized, but that's where we're setting up at.
And where do you typically see the highest attendance? Is it, certain parks in certain parts of the state, or is it events or facilities, or did neither play a role in that?
So state parks is unique in many different ways, right? New York State is unique. I mean, the diverse landscape, the diverse experience. You can go from Long Island to Niagara to the Thousand Islands, Finger Lakes, and everything in between. So some parks are international destinations like Niagara Falls. Some are regional destinations, but a lot of our state parks are local destinations, right? It should go out to take, your pet for a walk, take a bike ride, or visit on an overnight or a 3-day weekend. So certainly flagship parks that are perhaps, near widely populated areas. But I think when you look at the headlines from Niagara Falls, Letchworth was, voted best state park in the country, many years back. Long Island and the 30 parks that they have there, and New York City, because of how widely populated it is. It runs the gamut, but I think it's for many different reasons our parks are populated, because people come from all over the world, or they just, come from their neighborhood and you just want to get outside and enjoy themselves.
That's Acting New York State Parks Commissioner Randy Simons speaking with the Legislative Gazette's Samantha Simmons. And that about does it for this week's show. The Legislative Gazette is a production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. We had help from the New York Public News Network. You can listen anytime at WAMCpodcast.org or anywhere you get your podcasts. Look for program number 2506. And join us again next week at this same time for more news on New York State government and politics. For the Legislative Gazette, I'm David Giustino. Support for the Legislative Gazette comes from United University Professions, representing 37,000 academic and professional employees at SUNY campuses and teaching hospitals across New York State. Frederick E. Cole, President, uupinfo.org.